What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
It's hard to think of a more loaded label for a character today than Mary Sue. As women increasingly take lead roles on screen and in big franchises, some have complained that we're seeing more examples of this unrealistically perfect female character whose superhuman skills and one-dimensional strength come off as unrelatable and annoying, and whose lack of nuance makes her boring and indistinct. The Mary Sue critique originally aligned with feminist frustrations about half-baked female character arcs and personalities. Flawless, totally impressive female leads might superficially seem like positive female representation, but because the characterization is so weak, they're actually a form of tokenism and a setback for complex female representation. More recently, though, the Mary Sue has done a 180, and many argue calling out Mary Sues has become an excuse to make sexist objections to women headlining beloved franchises and popular media.
I don't buy the Mary Sue thing anyway. I find the term sexist.
Complicating this debate even further, despite all the talk of rampant Mary Sues, it's actually hard to identify specific examples that everyone can agree truly fit the trope. Given how controversial and difficult it is to define who is a Mary Sue, it's time to start focusing instead on who isn't. The non-Mary Sue is a dynamic, complicated female character whose flaws are intrinsically connected to her story. Here is our take on what exactly makes a non-Mary Sue.
What is your thing, then?
Complex female characters?
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to be notified about all of our new videos. The Mary Sue first appeared in a 1973 Star Trek fan fiction parody titled A Trekkie's Tale, which mocked the way flat female characters feel out of place in their stories. The story's protagonist, Lieutenant Mary Sue, in the words of a 2015 Vox article, grabs the attention of both Captain Kirk, who falls in love with her immediately, and Spock, who admires her logic. Mary Sue, just 15 and a half years old, takes over the ship and receives the Nobel Peace Prize. This all-too-perfect female character served as a way for author Paula Smith to poke fun at other fanfiction writers who insert idealized versions of themselves into their narratives as a form of wish fulfillment. Over time, the Mary Sue term was applied outside of the fanfic community to a wide range of characters who, some said, were boringly perfect.
Unless I miss something, you don't speak French.
Fake it till you make it.
Many iterations of Nancy Drew fit the description of a Mary Sue because Nancy is extremely clever, charming, and capable of seemingly anything, while everyone around her is unable to match her skill.
I'm guessing you two are working with Lawrence McNabb, the locksmith, that he gives you the keys and you're responsible for the recent string of burglaries.
Similarly, in the action genre, Alice in Resident Evil has often been named as a Mary Sue because she's insanely powerful and close to indestructible, lacks much actual personality, and makes others in her story appear useless by comparison. Bella from Twilight may be considered a Mary Sue because she's portrayed as extremely innately special for no particular reason. And while her personality lacks depth, each of her potential love interests find her completely irresistible.
Why did you hate me so much when we met?
Only for making me want you so badly. I still don't know if I can control myself.
50 Shades of Grey, which originated as Twilight fanfiction, also centers around a more or less indistinct female character who attracts the obscenely rich and handsome Christian and is the only person who can save him from himself.
I don't need her. I need you.
A case can also be made against Emily in Paris, a happy-go-lucky American girl who thrives at her new job in Paris by finding implausible solutions to the conflict she often creates. In the much-hyped Game of Thrones battle against the White Walkers, fans cried Mary Sue when Arya Stark swooped in to defeat the show's most notorious villain, the Night King, in a sudden moment that struck many as unrealistic and improbable, even though overall Arya is a fleshed-out, complex character. But perhaps the most famous and controversial character to be labeled as Mary Sue in recent history is Star Wars' Rey.
We need the last piece, and somehow you convinced the droid to show it to you. You, the scavenger.
The accusation has caused vicious online debate since 2015, becoming essentially a culture war issue. Some fans feel that the Star Wars franchise resorted to two-dimensional writing for the sake of satisfying the audience's desire for strong female characters, while others believe that labeling Rey a Mary Sue is sexist, since she's no more improbably perfect than most male heroes in Star Wars or other franchises.
I don't think there's a thing called Ryan Craig.
In his 2018 article titled, "Is Rey from The Last Jedi a Mary Sue, and is it sexist to think she is?" Matthew Kadish outlines 5 criteria to evaluate if characters will resonate with audiences, i.e. not be a Mary Sue. If they have a transformative character arc, are driven by a concrete motivation, pursue their motivations actively rather than simply being a reactive character, experience character struggle resulting from both external and internal obstacles, and lastly, but most importantly, are likable. That last category, likability, is by far the most nebulous and loaded. Kadish cites story consultant Michael Haig for a list of some traits that inspire likability, such as making characters good at what they do, making them funny, having them undergo an undeserved misfortune, or giving them a strong moral code.
If I see a situation pointed south, I can't ignore it.
And Kadish actually writes that Rey is likable and just fails the other 4 tests. But the emphasis on likability, as well as Kadish's and others' focus on whether a Mary Sue upstages all other characters she's on screen with, can make it pretty easy for this debate to descend into sexism. In a 2015 essay with Star Wars' Rey, We've Reached Peak Strong Female Character, Tasha Robinson points out that other characters within the Star Wars canon, and many iconic heroes outside of it, never received the same level of judgment and scrutiny as Rey had. Quote, "Yes, Rey should be an extreme outlier, not a model for every female character to aspire to, just as not every male character in the movie should be Captain America or Ethan Hunt. But she should also be allowed to be as unquestionably superlative a protagonist as they are."
A symbol to the nation. A hero to the world. The story of Captain America is one of honor, bravery, and sacrifice.
In other words, whether or not Rey is a Mary Sue is not the point. While we can all agree that no one likes a true Mary Sue, it's clear that male characters are just not judged by these high standards. In Vox's analysis of the Rey Mary Sue debacle, in which they write off the notion that Rey is a Mary Sue, they discuss the male equivalent of the Mary Sue, sometimes called a Gary Stew. Writing, "The idea of the Mary Sue carries with it an inherent gender bias. Very rarely does a male character get called out as a Gary Stew. And it's hard to overlook the fact that complaints about Mary Sues often arise in male-dominated fandoms, too often overlapping with or seeming to justify some male fans' distress that female characters are taking center stage in worlds they love."
Sign our petition to make Quandor the Dragon a male.
There are already enough girl characters. We don't need a third.
Since much of the dialogue surrounding the Mary Sue is so contradictory and loaded, in order to address this issue, it's easier to highlight examples of the non-Mary Sue, a person who possesses special gifts or power, but who is also a flawed, multidimensional, interesting character.
I fell asleep on both my arms.
At her core, the non-Mary Sue is a woman whose strengths are tied to her faults. One recent example of a non-Mary Sue in a well-established franchise is Sylvie from Loki. Sylvie has a satisfying, heart-wrenching character arc. Her actions are mostly active rather than reactive. She has clear motivation throughout the show's first season to destroy the TVA.
The TVA showed up, erased my reality, took me prisoner. I was just a child.
And her intense distrust of others provides Sylvie with an internal conflict to match the external obstacles put in her way by the shadowy organization. She's likable due to her distinct sense of humor.
How do I look?
Like someone with a shit plan.
It's a great plan.
Tragic backstory, and her bond with Loki, which becomes her final obstacle as she must make the difficult choice between him and completing her much-desired revenge. Most centrally, Sylvie is powerful but imperfect. Another very different example of the non-Mary Sue is Little Women's rebellious Jo March.
You keep your $500 and I'll keep the copyright. Also, I want 10% of royalties.
She has a clear motivation to become a great writer, but this puts her at odds with the norms of her time as well as jeopardizes her relationship with childhood best friend Lori. External and internal obstacles, check.
I don't see why I can't love you as you want me to. I don't know why.
She's good at what she does and has a strong moral code, making her likable. While derived from that same code are a set of personality flaws, like her headstrong nature, which cause Jo to doubt herself and wrestle with what she wants, versus what society dictates she should want.
I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.
Like Sylvie's, Jo's struggles relate directly to the themes of the story she's in, and while she may appear an ideal feminist or a trailblazer from our perspective today, as a character, she's far from idealized. Another great example of a non-Mary Sue is Veronica Mars, a sharp-minded and brazen amateur detective who is often brought down by her own internal conflicts. While she could easily fall into the overly gifted aspect of a Mary Sue, the show makes sure to highlight how her knack for solving cases is the cause of both her career success and her relationship failures. She struggles with becoming obsessive about her investigations and prioritizing her own goals above those around her.
What made you think you had the right to do something like this?
What are you talking about, have the right? This is what we do. This is how we survive.
Scandal takes this focus on character flaws even further through Olivia Pope, a character whose job is crisis management, but who's willing to risk causing the biggest scandal ever through having an affair with the president. Olivia is the absolute best at what she does, which means at first she's presented almost like a too perfect Mary Sue.
It's handled.
But her talent and ambition can be off-putting, morally compromising, and make her too harsh and brutal for those around her.
I'm talking about our friend crossing a line. I am talking about replacing the white hat with a black skull cap.
In The Flight Attendant, protagonist Cassie's free-spirited charisma is clearly linked to her flaws and the degree to which her life is a mess.
What's wrong with messy?
The show's external murder plot is mirrored by its deeper conflict of her inner struggle to confront her traumatic past, addiction problem, and refusal to grow up. Constantly witty and likable, even as she does many unlikable things, Cassie is a unique balance of caring and selfish. A bombshell who at times we might pity, with impressive skills that are paired with blatant inabilities. A prime example of a non-Mary Sue.
I am totally nice. I am professional. I am kind.
Don't drink, Cassie.
Netflix's Never Have I Ever revolves around teenage Davy, who is remarkably intelligent and has multiple love interests. However, the show addresses how Davy struggles with grief and often fails to control her anger.
Davy has what you might consider a short fuse. And sometimes she's a straight-up psycho, which I find pretty admirable.
A flaw which directly affects the narrative and provides a realistic alternative to the invariably calm, cool, and collected Mary Sue. Ultimately, the non-Mary Sue's complex combination of her successes and her failures provide the multifaceted storytelling we should demand from characters of any gender. The term Mary Sue has become so divisive that some are even calling for the name's retirement. Film Objective's MC Myers suggested that reasonable debate is not possible once the label is involved, stating, "The people who use Mary Sue in a sexist way have encouraged the reaction of those who believe that any grievance with these characters must be motivated by sexism. Either way you swing, objective analysis loses." While this solution may lead to fewer arguments, it doesn't address the main issue, that we still lack fascinating, realistically written female characters.
The entire city looks like Ratatouille.
As we've seen, a key to a well-written character is having interesting flaws that connect to the story's themes. But critics and audiences tend to judge a female character more harshly for those same flaws that, in a male character, are dubbed humanizing or relatable. As The Atlantic's Maria Konnikova wrote in 2013, over the last 30 or so years, work by social psychologists like Susan Fiske and Mina Chikara has repeatedly demonstrated that women are perceived and evaluated on different criteria than men. Not only are the same traits that are seen as positive in one, say assertiveness in men, reconstrued as negative in the other, say pushiness in women, but we put different relative values on different traits depending on gender. Niceness, for instance, is seen as consistently more important in women than it is in men.
A nice girl doesn't force their opinions on people. A nice girl smiles and waves and says thank you.
The quintessential example of this gender bias at work is the audience reaction surrounding Breaking Bad. Though many viewers excused Walt's behaviors like manufacturing methamphetamine and murdering people, his wife Skyler received audience vitriol for such major sins as being a killjoy and having an affair after her husband refused to give her a divorce. This example also proves why character flaws need to be integrated into the story. Walt's insane ego drives the drama and illuminates the show's central question of why a person breaks bad. So we're fascinated to see what story results from his flaws.
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
Skylar's flaws, meanwhile, put a damper on all the show's fun and make her an obstacle to more drama happening. Similarly, other anti-heroes' wives, like The Sopranos' Carmela Soprano, and especially Mad Men's Betty Draper, faced more scrutiny for their personality flaws than their husbands, who were hailed as fascinating and charismatic even while they undertook actions that were many multiples worse.
Scandalized my child. Took another man's name.
Debates about film and pop culture too often hash out whether female characters are likable enough. But when male critics declare that a female character is unrelatable, how often does this simply reveal that they struggle to relate to a female lead, period? A study done by the Center for the Study of Women in Television verified that male critics are harsher than female critics on stories led by women. And this matters because there are a lot more male critics.
There are 760 men who weigh in on the tomato meter. There are 168 women.
Critics and audiences aren't used to realistically flawed female characters on screen because they haven't grown up seeing a lot of them. The primarily male creators of popular media have long crafted male characters whose flaws are written in a true-to-life, universally relatable manner, versus female characters who are sprinkled with flaws in an unrealistic, formulaic, or superficial way. A rom-com heroine is made clumsy because it's a flaw that's supposed to endear her, not because it actually represents a deep obstacle to her growth or driver of her story. Skylar's stereotypically female sins, like the affair, occasionally smoking while pregnant, and pestering her husband about money, also fit a larger pattern in the kinds of flaws that female characters typically are given, namely, being either a nag or a cheater. These flaws aren't even really about the woman herself or her internal world, but only ways in which she wrongs a man.
Walt, the MasterCard's the one we don't use.
A great modern non-Mary Sue who corrects these problems is Ozark's Wendy, whose flaws, like her thwarted career ambitions and desire for more power, are all about her, push the story along, create jeopardy for her family, and result in internal struggles about her priorities.
Adam and Eve probably grabbed that apple because they were starving, and it was the first tree they saw.
It's important to remember that one of the main original issues with the Mary Sue is that she's merely shallow, tokenistic representation for women. Presenting a female character as impossibly annoyingly perfect often feels easier or safer than making her real. So the most crucial step in writing real female characters is allowing actual women to write, direct, film, and review them. Instead of fighting over whether or not a character qualifies as a Mary Sue, putting your efforts into recognizing and creating more non-Mary Sues can solve this problem for good.
Women, they have minds and they have souls.
This is The Take on your favorite movie, shows, and culture.
Subscribe so you can watch all of our videos.